The hum of the dishwasher filled the quiet kitchen as Michael sat at the table, sifting through spreadsheets on his laptop. It was a nightly ritual he'd fallen into, a meticulous review of the family's finances. As an accountant, numbers came naturally to him, and he prided himself on keeping their lives organized. His wife, Emma, often teased him about being overly cautious. "Michael, you're going to find your own mistakes one day if you keep looking that hard," Emma had joked just last week, ruffling his hair as she walked past him with a glass of wine. Her laugh was warm and familiar, a melody he never questioned. Michael and Emma had been married for 12 years. Their story began as most do, a whirlwind romance in their late 20s. Emma's bright smile and quick wit had captivated him from the moment they met. She worked as an interior designer, her creativity a sharp contrast to Michael's logical, methodical nature. Together, they built a life that seemed perfect from the outside. A modest house in the suburbs, 2 young children, and a dog named Charlie. But lately, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with small things. Emma's phone, once casually left on the counter, now seemed permanently attached to her. She started working late more often, her explanations vague. "Big client," she would say, waving it off. Michael wanted to believe her. He always had. One night, as Emma slept soundly beside him, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of his doubts pressed on him. Maybe it was work stress getting to her. Maybe it was him. He thought back to their anniversary dinner a few months ago when she seemed distracted, her laughter slightly forced. It wasn't until a week later, during an otherwise uneventful Saturday morning, that the first real crack appeared. Emma had left for her yoga class, and Michael decided to tidy up the office. As he rearranged papers on her desk, a slip of paper caught his eye, a bank statement. He frowned. They only had one joint account, and he'd never seen this statement before. The account number wasn't familiar. Curiosity turned to confusion as he read further. It wasn't just the account, it was the balance. $35,000. Michael's stomach dropped. He searched his memory, trying to recall if they discussed opening another account. Nothing came to mind. The transactions were equally perplexing. Restaurants he didn't recognize, hotel charges in the city, and what appeared to be gift shop purchases. A chill crept up his spine. By the time Emma returned, Michael had slipped the statement back into the pile of papers. She kissed him on the cheek and started chatting about her yoga session, oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside him. Over the next few days, Michael couldn't concentrate at work. Questions swirled in his mind. Was Emma hiding something? And if so, what? He told himself it could be innocent, maybe a surprise for their upcoming anniversary. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Michael casually brought up the topic of finances. "Hey, Em," he started, keeping his tone light, "I was thinking we should go over our accounts sometime. You know, just to make sure we're on track." Emma's face froze for a split second, a blink and you miss it moment, but Michael caught it. "Sure," she said, smiling, "whenever you want." Her response did little to ease his concerns. Michael decided he needed answers, and he wasn't going to get them by asking. Michael's unease grew with each passing day. The bank statement haunted him, the numbers burned into his memory. He couldn't focus on anything else. As much as he wanted to confront Emma, something held him back. He needed more information, proof, even, before he could accuse his wife of hiding something so significant. Late one night, after Emma and the kids were asleep, Michael sat in his home office with the lights dimmed. He opened his laptop and logged into their joint bank account. The familiar numbers and transactions appeared, but he was looking for something else. He opened a new browser tab and began searching for ways to trace hidden accounts. Hours of research led him to a method that could work. He could request a soft inquiry through a financial service to cross-check their names against other accounts. It wasn't entirely above board, but desperation clouded his judgment. The next day, Michael found an excuse to leave work early. He visited the local bank where he and Emma held their accounts. Using his status as a co-holder of their joint account, he asked to update their financial records. The clerk smiled politely and agreed to check their profile. "Actually," the clerk said after a moment, "it looks like there's another account listed under your wife's name. It's a separate account, not linked to your joint one. Michael felt his breath catch. Can I see it? He asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. The clerk hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, but you don't have authorization for that account. Only Mrs. Bennett can access it. Michael clenched his fists under the desk but managed a tight smile. Of course. Thank you. Walking out of the bank, Michael felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. There was no denying it now. Emma was hiding something. And if she had gone to the trouble of keeping a separate account, it wasn't likely to be innocent. Over the next week, Michael became a shadow of himself. He began checking Emma's phone when she left the room, scanning her text messages and call logs. But Emma was careful. There was nothing incriminating. Still, the bank account loomed large in his mind, and Michael knew it was time to take a more drastic step. One evening, while Emma was out with friends, Michael hired a private investigator. He found the man through a discreet online forum and met him in a dingy coffee shop on the edge of town. The investigator, a wiry man named Greg, listened intently as Michael explained the situation. You're saying she's got a secret bank account, and you think it's connected to an affair? Greg asked, scribbling notes in a small notepad. Michael hesitated. Saying the words out loud felt surreal. I don't know for sure. I need to know what she's hiding. Greg nodded. I'll start with financial tracing and surveillance. If there's anything going on, we'll find it. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare for Michael. He was constantly on edge, waiting for updates from Greg. At the same time, he had to act normal around Emma and the kids, pretending everything was fine. Emma seemed oblivious to his inner turmoil, though Michael noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She smiled less, her attention seemed divided, and she spent more time on her phone. Finally, Greg called. We've got something, he said. Michael's heart pounded as Greg detailed his findings. The secret account had been active for nearly 5 years, with regular deposits and withdrawals. Some of the larger transactions were tied to a luxury hotel downtown, as well as expensive jewelry stores. Here's the kicker, Greg said. I tracked her movements last Friday. She went to the hotel, stayed for about 3 hours, and left with a man. Late 30s, dark hair, drove a black SUV. I'm still running his plates. Michael's hand tightened around his phone. His worst fears were confirmed. Do you want me to dig deeper on the guy? Greg asked. Yes, Michael said through gritted teeth. I want to know everything. The following days were a blur of rage and sorrow for Michael. The image of Emma with another man replayed in his mind like a broken record. He couldn't look at her without wondering how long she'd been lying to him. How many nights had she smiled at him while carrying on with someone else? Greg called again a few days later. The guy's name is Ethan Clark. He's an attorney based downtown. Divorced, no kids. Looks like your wife's been seeing him for at least 3 years, based on their financial records. Michael's stomach churned. 3 years. For 3 years, Emma had been carrying on an affair while he worked tirelessly to provide for their family. Michael knew he couldn't confront Emma. Not yet. He needed to understand why. What had gone so wrong in their marriage that she felt the need to betray him? He started observing her more closely, noting the times she was distracted or evasive. One night, as they sat together watching a movie, he noticed her phone light up with a text message. Emma quickly turned the screen away and set the phone face down on the couch. Michael's jaw tightened. He excused himself to the kitchen, his mind racing. The text confirmed what he already knew, but it also strengthened his resolve. He wasn't just going to confront Emma. He was going to make sure she understood the depth of her betrayal. The tension in the Bennett household had reached a breaking point. Michael had perfected the art of masking his inner turmoil, but every moment he spent near Emma felt like a knife twisting in his chest. Each glance, each touch, each laugh, they all seemed tainted now. The final piece of the puzzle arrived on a rainy Thursday evening. Greg sent Michael a file containing pictures, documents, and messages between Emma and Ethan. It was undeniable proof of the affair. The photos showed them together at the hotel, walking hand in hand, laughing like carefree lovers. The messages were even more damning. Declarations of love, promises of a future, and plans that made Michael's blood boil. He stared at the screen for hours, his emotions swinging wildly between rage, despair, and cold calculation. By the time the rain stopped, Michael had made a decision. The confrontation was set for the following Saturday. Emma had mentioned she would be meeting a client in the afternoon, but Michael knew better. He told her he'd be working late at the office, ensuring he had the time and space he needed. When Saturday arrived, Michael packed a small duffel bag with essentials and drove the kids to his mother's house under the pretense of giving Emma some quiet time. His mother, sensing something was wrong, asked if everything was okay. Michael forced a smile. "Just work stress, Mom. I'll be back to pick them up tomorrow." By the time he returned home, Emma was already gone. Michael went into her office and opened the drawer where she kept her personal files. He found the bank statement, the same one that had started this nightmare, and placed it on the dining table along with the pictures and messages Greg had uncovered. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down to wait. Emma walked through the door just after 6 p.m., her hair slightly disheveled and her cheeks flushed. She paused when she saw Michael sitting in the dining room, the glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're home early," she said, her tone light but cautious. Michael didn't respond. He gestured to the table instead. Emma's eyes followed his hand, landing on the pile of evidence. Her face paled, and she took an involuntary step back. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You tell me," Michael said, his voice cold and measured. Emma's hands shook as she reached for the photos. She barely glanced at them before dropping them back onto the table. "Michael, How long, Emma?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "How long have you been lying to me?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not what you think. Don't." Michael slammed his hand on the table, making Emma flinch. "Don't insult me by pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like. 3 years, Emma. 3 years of betrayal. And for what? Him?" He pointed to a picture of her with Ethan. Emma's tears spilled over as she sank into a chair. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. It just happened." Michael laughed bitterly. "It just happened? A secret bank account, thousands of dollars spent on hotels and gifts. These don't just happen, Emma. You made choices. You chose to betray me, to betray our family." Emma buried her face in her hands. "I didn't know how to stop. I felt trapped." "Trapped?" Michael's voice was venomous. "You felt trapped in the life we built together? In the life I worked my ass off to provide for you and the kids?" "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Michael said, his voice breaking. "You destroyed everything." The room fell silent except for Emma's quiet sobs. Michael stared at her, his heart aching despite his anger. He had loved her with every fiber of his being, and now that love felt like a cruel joke. After what felt like an eternity, Michael stood. "I've already talked to a lawyer," he said. "I'm filing for divorce." Emma's head shot up. "Michael, please, don't do this. We can fix this." "No, Emma," he said firmly. "You can't fix this. You made your choice. Now, I'm making mine." As Michael walked out the door that night, he felt an odd sense of relief. The confrontation had been brutal, but it was also cathartic. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest had lifted. Michael drove aimlessly for hours after leaving the house. The streets blurred together under the glow of streetlights, and the rain had started again, drumming softly against the windshield. He replayed the confrontation over and over in his mind, his emotions swinging between vindication and despair. Eventually, he parked in front of a 24-hour diner. The bright neon sign felt almost mocking, promising warmth and comfort he couldn't feel. Inside, he ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth, staring out the window as the rain streaked down the glass. For years, Michael had built his life around Emma and their family. Every decision, every sacrifice, had been for their future. Now, the foundation of that life was gone, shattered by her betrayal. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. "Please come home. We need to talk more." "I can't let it end like this." Michael stared at the message for a long time before turning off his phone. He wasn't ready to face her again. The next morning, Michael picked up the kids from his mother's house. Their laughter and chatter filled the car, a stark contrast to his heavy heart. He forced a smile as they told him about the pancakes Grandma had made and the movie they'd watched. At home, Emma was waiting. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked like she hadn't slept. The kids ran to her, oblivious to the tension between their parents. Emma hugged them tightly, her gaze meeting Michael's over their heads. "We need to talk," she said softly after the kids had gone to their rooms. Michael nodded, though he already knew where the conversation was headed. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Emma began, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I can't undo what I've done. But please, Michael, don't let this destroy our family. Think about the kids." Michael's jaw tightened. "I am thinking about them. Do you think they deserve to grow up in a home built on lies? Because that's what this is now, a lie." Emma flinched but didn't argue. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," she said. "Therapy, counseling, anything. I just need a chance to fix this." Michael leaned back, exhaustion etched into his features. "You had years to make different choices, Emma. You didn't. And now you want me to pretend like it's all fixable? It's not." Tears streamed down her face, but Michael didn't waver. The pain in his chest was a constant reminder of the betrayal, and he couldn't ignore it. Over the following weeks, Michael began the process of separating their lives. He moved into a small apartment nearby to stay close to the kids, who were too young to fully understand what was happening. Emma had told them that Daddy would be staying somewhere else for a while, but reassured them they would still see him all the time. Michael threw himself into his work, using it as a distraction from the emotional chaos. He met with his lawyer to finalize the divorce paperwork and worked out a custody arrangement that prioritized the children's well-being. At night, the loneliness crept in. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and Michael often found himself staring at old photos of happier times. He wondered if he could have done something differently, if there had been signs he missed. But no matter how much he questioned himself, the truth remained the same. Emma had made her choice. One evening, as he picked up the kids for his weekend with them, Emma handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, his tone wary. "Just read it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Later, after the kids were asleep, Michael opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Emma. In the letter, she apologized for everything, for the lies, the betrayal, and the pain she had caused. She explained that her affair had started during a difficult period in their marriage when she felt neglected and unappreciated. But she didn't use it as an excuse. She admitted she had made terrible choices and that she would live with the regret for the rest of her life. At the end of the letter, Emma wrote, "No matter what happens, I hope you find happiness again. You deserve that, Michael. More than anyone I know." Michael folded the letter and set it aside. The anger that had consumed him for so long began to fade, replaced by a deep sadness. He knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but for the sake of his children, he would have to find a way to coexist with Emma. Months passed, and the pieces of Michael's life slowly began to rearrange themselves. The divorce was finalized, and the custody arrangement went into effect. The children spent weekdays with Emma and weekends with Michael, a routine that seemed to work well for everyone involved. Michael focused on creating a new sense of normalcy. His apartment, once stark and impersonal, now bore signs of his children's presence. Crayon drawings on the fridge, toys scattered across the floor, and framed photos of happy moments he shared with them. Though life remained complicated, Michael found solace in the small victories. His daughter's excitement when she learned to ride her bike, his son's laughter during their weekly movie nights. These moments reminded him of what truly mattered. Emma, too, seemed to be trying to rebuild her life. She reached out to Michael occasionally, updating him on the kids or asking for advice. Their conversations were polite but distant, a far cry from the intimacy they once shared. One day, while picking up the kids from Emma's house, Michael noticed a for sale sign in the yard. "You're moving?" he asked, surprised. Emma nodded. "I think it's time for a fresh start. The kids and I will be staying with my sister for a while, until I figure out the next step." Michael didn't respond immediately. He glanced at the house, the place where so many memories, good and bad, had been made. "I hope it works out for you," he said finally. "Thank you," Emma replied softly. For Michael, healing came in stages. He started attending a support group for divorced parents, where he met others who had gone through similar experiences. Sharing his story and hearing others' perspectives helped him process his emotions and gain clarity. One evening after a meeting, he struck up a conversation with a woman named Rachel. She was warm and kind, with a gentle sense of humor that put him at ease. Over time, their conversations extended beyond the group, and they began meeting for coffee and walks in the park. Rachel wasn't a replacement for what Michael had lost, but she represented something new. The possibility of moving forward without the weight of the past holding him back. The turning point came during one of Michael's weekends with the kids. They were at the park, playing tag while Michael watched from a nearby bench. Rachel joined them, her laughter blending with the children's as she joined in the game. As Michael watched them, a thought struck him. Happiness wasn't something that could be found in the past. It was something to be built, piece by piece, in the present. Weeks later, during one of their co-parenting exchanges, Emma asked Michael how he was doing. "I'm getting there," he said honestly. "How about you?" Emma hesitated before answering. "I'm trying too. It's not easy, but I think I'm starting to figure things out." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. "I hope you find happiness, Emma," Michael said finally. "For yourself and for the kids." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you, Michael. I hope the same for you." Months turned into years, and life continued to evolve. Michael and Emma settled into their roles as co-parents, working together to ensure the children felt loved and supported. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined Michael's life. Rachel became a steady presence in his world, not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as a partner in the life he was building anew. Together, they created new traditions and memories, blending their experiences into something uniquely theirs. One evening, as Michael stood in his kitchen, helping his daughter with her homework while Rachel played a board game with his son, he felt a deep sense of contentment. His life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was full of love and purpose. And for the first time in a long time, Michael felt whole.